Hi everyone, welcome to day 5 of my sew along where we're going to put all the sleeves in and make them. And the sleeves we'll be making is a plain set-in sleeve with a beautiful ruffle at the hem. Then we're going to do the utterly irresistible little puff sleeves with a turn-up. Then I've got some flutter sleeves. If you like flutter sleeves, this is a really easy option for you. And then again, we have some plain sleeves where we're going to put a facing on and insert some lace, which is also really cool. So I hope that you're really going to enjoy this. So without further ado, let's start on our first sleeve. Putting sleeves in is something that people find really difficult, and that's why we're going to take it super slow and do the whole variety, all 4 of them, so that you can see how it's done and you don't have to be scared anymore. The first sleeve I want to show you here is a plain set-in sleeve with the facing. And that looks really nice. Of course, every time you make something like this, you always think, could I have done something different? Like, for example, could I have made this distance a little bit smaller? So in the pack, I'm going to make some alterations to what I think would actually be really stunning. But for now, I leave it exactly like it is. I think it's very cute. So let's put that back. This is the actual sleeve we're making. I've inserted some lace into it here and we top stitched it from the outside, and what's different here is that we literally sewed it on there and then we rolled it to the outside, which of course is different to what you normally do, so you have to be a bit careful there, and then you get this beautiful little sleeve. So let's get started and see how that works. It's actually very simple. The first thing to do is to add the lace to your little bit of facing, and I've already cut off some of my lace here, as you can see, so that I can put it on, and I'm only going to do it foot width. So to the outer edge of what I'm doing, I'm going to put my lace, make sure that's the right side up, like it's the wrong way again, not that anybody's really going to notice, and just put that on here, and then we're going to stitch right in here onto it, and it's just foot width. So pop it under, and then we go from one end to the other. Keep it nice and steady at that foot width distance to the edge. Now I'm just going to press it that the seam allowance goes down. Actually, if I turn it over, maybe it's a little bit easier to see, right, like that. So the seam allowance actually faces down. I actually prefer to iron it from this side because I can see if I maybe need to move it up a little bit. I can shimmy it with my hand the same way we did on the dress when we didn't get it quite right. You could do that here if it's not quite lining up by ironing it from this side. It's easier to see where you've gone wrong, and if you haven't, then it's beautiful. So you got a really nice result here. Now I'm going to close my seams. The only pin I would put in here is where the lace starts, so it doesn't move. Now lace here, this is very sturdy, so I'm going to cut this back pretty smartish and iron this a little bit apart. With a bit of luck, it'll go over the end of your sleeve ironing board like this. And then we're just going to press that in, and again you want to get rid of all your threads. Next step is to close the sleeve as well. It's very important always to watch out that you have a pad because your overlocking has an upper side and an underside, and if you put the upper side underneath it when you're overlocking, that will tell you which one is the right and the wrong side. If you ever get confused, that's one of the ways to tell. You are still not sure, the one that's curved more along this area here is the one that is the front. So I'm going to close that little seam now. Always turns itself off, so I have to wait for it to get hot. Now we can put on our facing to the actual sleeve. This is where it's a little bit different to what you normally do, because you do right sides facing, right? This time, turn your little sleeve so that the right side is to the outside. And then you take your facing and you slide that in, so you effectively have the wrong side to the right side, yeah? So that when we roll it to the outside, we have the right side on the outside. So I'm putting one pin in here, stick this in, put another pin in here maybe, and here. You don't really need to overpin this. In fact, the one I did back there, I didn't pin it at all. Should pin it though a little bit. Right, back to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew this in. Now, the key to sewing all these things in is that you always sew from the inside. So put your sleeve under, sew all the way around, and when you do it like this, you can move the sleeve round really easily. And again, I did that with foot width seam allowance because it really doesn't need a centimetre. You would just end up cutting it shorter, which is not what you want. And there we go. So now it's on. The next step is to understitch. How do I understitch? Right? We want this to roll towards the outside. Let's just turn it so you can see it. So you got your seam on the inside, and then it will roll up like this. That's gorgeous, right? And then we're going to top stitch it here. To make sure that it doesn't roll up and show any of this, we understitch it. And what that means is that we stitch the seam allowance to the actual sleeve. And once we've done that, it will roll up like that and it'll never pop out. So that's why understitching is so important. So I'll go back under here. You can start anywhere on your sleeve because it sits to the inside, nobody's going to see it. And then you stitch your seam allowance to the seam. Now comes the big moment. I can roll this to the outside and I can give it a quick press if I want to. You don't even need to do that necessarily because you can see how beautiful that sits. Really nice. So you can give it a quick press, although the one thing that understitching is really good for is the fact that you do not need to necessarily press this at all. Just doing a tiny little bit here. And now I can go back to my sewing machine and I can stitch it all the way around. Pop it under. Stitch at an even distance. Make sure the stitch length is 3.5. We don't want it to be too small. Now we come to the really interesting part, that's putting your little sleeve in. Now a sleeve always has a marking for a sleeve head and for the sleeve head on here. Now with any pattern you do, that might actually vary, so you need to put in your sleeve and see how it falls. A sleeve should never fall towards the back, it should always fall towards the front. The way I put my sleeves in is my little trick. I put it on the actual side that it needs to go on, and then I'm going through the armhole where it needs to go, and then I can just pick that up here, the bodice, and I can put on top of each other the underarm seam. It's always the same actually. And then I go to the top and I put the sleeve head on the sleeve head. The rule number one is that at the lower end of your sleeve, it actually goes in fairly flat. So one of the things you want to get into the habit of is having your hands right underneath your sleeve like this. So you're kind of like not doing that, but you're doing this first. You're molding it to the outside first, like this, and then it goes in. And you do that here as well. It's really easy to start pinning that way around, and you want to pin with your sleeve lying on top, like this. And I move round, and I can already see my sleeve head there. It's not going to fit on there. It's in a different place. Whoops. Like that. So I've got a couple of pins up. Now I'm pinning my front first, because in the front you don't need to hold in anything, right? Your holding in needs to start here and it goes round the back, because obviously that's where the movement is. So now I'm going from the other side and I'm put my sleeve in, do the same thing again. It's this rolling action, and once you've got this down, you'll not find this difficult at all. There we go. Roll it to the outside. And this is not a sleeve that goes in with lots of ease. In fact, I might add some ease to it. I think it really hasn't got enough. I know I always get these like comments from people saying there's so much ease, but actually I don't think there's enough on here. If you find you have too much ease, you find it really difficult to get in, then put a thread 1 centimeter distance off the edge and you pull that a bit, and that will help you. But as you can see here, it's like going in nearly flat with this new pattern, and I feel like I need to add a bit of ease really. Then comes the next important thing for your sleeve. You roll your seam allowance to the outside like this. You put your hand into it and you have a look at how it sits. And it should not fall towards the back or do that. It needs to fall towards the front. And it does do that. And you also need to see how it falls on the side, right? And that's pretty good really. That's first try. Not because I'm really brilliant, which of course I am, but because it's fairly easy to put in. There isn't a lot of ease in it. I think I need to put some ease in. Have I said that already? Very nice. When you're happy with your sleeve, you can sew it in. Pop it under. Make sure that you sew from the inside of the sleeve as per everything else that you possibly could sew. If you have any extra that will try and push, use a pin to hold it in place while you're sewing. That's pretty nice. Not losing any of those pins again. And now I can just quickly check this and then overlock it. Always check that you have got a really smooth sleeve head. That's really nice actually. That came out quite good. I like it. So when you're pleased with it, then you can go and overlock it. Make sure it's nice and flat underneath so that you're not catching anything. And then you go all the way around. The next step for a perfect sleeve is to iron the seam flat. What you never ever do actually is to iron it from the outside. The only thing you can do is steam it and then smooth it with your hand. What you want to do is iron flat the seam allowance that's on the inside, and that will make your sleeve really sit nicely. Makes it look more professional actually, and a lot of people don't do that. They don't iron it from here, they actually iron it from the outside. They kind of like go, okay, yeah, but you don't do that. We're going to have a quick look now at what that looks like from this side. Very nice. So I'm going to demonstrate what you're allowed to do with a sleeve. Okay, so I've got it up here. What you can do to make sure it stays there, you put lots of steam on it and then you move it over with your hand. You don't want to flatten it too much because that will not look nice. You want it nice and rounded. So some of you might have one of those eggs. That's really good for this. So lots of steam, but none of the iron sitting on it because the iron will make it too flat. Just a little bit with a hand and you get a really beautiful result. As you can see here, it's very nice and flat and absolutely gorgeous. I just need to put the buttons on now and we are done with this beautiful dress. I'm really quite impressed with it. We can move on to the next sleeve now, and that is our flutter sleeve. Now I'm going to show you a really simple flutter sleeve. Let me introduce it on this little dress. I think it's probably the simplest little sleeve you could ever do like that. A flutter can be inserted also just from up here, which I originally thought that I would do, but it means that you have to put a facing inside, and that's simply not possible with what I'm doing here because I've already got it faced. So you can put the pattern in my sleeve pack in that way. I think it's actually really cute. It's a pretty big little sleeve, but it will stand nicely, and little girls tend to really love their flutter sleeves. Also, they have loads and loads of movement room. Now let's put on this bias binding here. We have had one side which was shorter than the other, and that's naturally the side that we are going to sew on. So we're going to put the slimmer edge here, right on here, and I'm just going to stitch this down. It couldn't be any simpler. It's really, really simple. You could also line this with a different color so you have a contrast. You could also do that. Put it right into the edge here and then just fold it over and sew. That's it. So simple. I've never made flutter sleeves before. This is because people have said they really like them. I think there's a lot more you can do that, so I will do some more videos on flutter sleeves. You know, different options of what you can do with them. For example, you could make this piece longer by splitting it in different areas. You could also make it slimmer to the side. The idea here is that when you put your flutter sleeve in, it will actually disappear around there in the armhole, but you do then have to have a facing like I just said, and that we really didn't want to do here because it's already very thick. I'm just going to sew over the edge here. The right and the wrong side of this fabric is exactly the same, so you can't go wrong either with putting them back to front. I'm just going to overlock this just to one side, and then I can iron it to one side, Doesn't matter which, as long as it's the opposite side to the sleeve, because I've also done that in one, haven't I? So what I can do here is just have it run the opposite side so it's nice and thin. And now I want to quickly put my gather threads in, and we now know how that works, so we're not showing that again. But I'm starting my gather threads from about here and here. It's about 4 centimeters in. I don't want that to be gathered before that. Stitch length to 4.5, and I'm going to just, whoopsie, make sure that it's gathered in the same way as that one, really. So I know my gathers kind of stop here and there. So I'm going to put a pin in here so I know, aha, that's the point to which I want to gather on this side, and on the back it actually stops up here. So I'm going to put another pin in there so I don't have them looking uneven. And now we do the same as you do with any sleeve. You just stick that on. There we go. Make sure that the seam allowances go opposite way. Pull this to the inside and then put a vertical pin to the seam in here. I might do another one so it doesn't fold over. I go to the top where I've marked my sleeve head. There we go. Up there. Put that on top of each other. And what I'm going to do now is just pull this, the threads that are underneath, just the bobbin threads, to sit up there, and see where that gets me to. I'm also going to pin in flat, as you would with any other sleeve, at the lower end where it comes around the arm. You really don't want that to be gathered at all. And I do the same on the other side. I'm going to pin this in. So I just have to pull this until it fits in the gap. That looks good. Yep, there we go. And if I wanted to, I could now secure it. It's the same as always with that figure of 8. Just wrap that round. Doody-doo. And then I take another pin. I can just like distribute them a little bit. You could do it on the sewing machine, but it's such a small space. I just do it here and put a pin in. Can help it out a bit when I get on the sewing machine. And this part here needs to be gathered to about there, so I'm going to go down there. There we are. Actually going to move a few over. I wouldn't get, you know, overly vicious with where's my sleeve head, because to be honest, doesn't matter. As long as they're even Steven, that's fine. So I'm going to just take this out and have a look on my back. And on the front, I'm going to compare these as well. Front looks okay. So now I can sew these in. I'm going to sew all the way around, and I'm going to arrange them a little bit nicer as I go along, as I did before on any other sleeve. So come here, baby. And let's go. I'm starting on a bit that is flat, because that's the easiest. Blocking my stitches. Oh, back down to 2.5. And around we go. I'm also only putting this in foot width. There we go. And now I can take this pin out, and you can see that this is uneven. I always have the same technique where I'm just distributing them as I go. I'm just distributing them as I go. Flutter sleeves done. All I need to do is take my pins out and overlock it. Make sure that there's no pins left in here before I go on the overlocker. Very good. And also what you might want to do is just check them quickly for yourself. Make sure that they look the same and that one doesn't look like terribly different to the other one. So yeah, that looks okay to me. Yep. Back's good as well. Excellent. So I'm going to overlock that now, and then we're going to do something that we don't normally do, and that is we're going to press them from the outside. With a flutter sleeve, you are allowed to do that. Any other sleeve, of course, you're not. Make sure it's nice and flat underneath. Now you can do it. I've done it on this side already to make it look a little bit more fluttery going out to that side. Otherwise they're going to stand up in the air like straight like that, which is not really what you want. So take your iron and just gently get them down a bit so they're not, you know, look too much like something I do a fierce thriller. There we go. Just make sure that they sit nicely. Let's have a look on here. And little girls, I am told, love flutter sleeves, and I have been determined to love them too. So here we go. Let's just get rid of this little bit. All I need to do here again are my buttons, and that is my second dress finish. I think it's really cute. Right, so let's put her to the back and we can continue on with our next sleeve. And finally, I'm just going to quickly talk you through the third sleeve in the sleeve pack, which is a plain sleeve like we've already done, but it has got the little ruffle on the end, and I don't really need to explain much to that because this is not even turned up or anything. So what you need to do is overlock and sew together your sleeve. Then you have to join the ruffle and overlock it and insert your gathers, and then you have to attach the both to each other. So the one important thing is, of course, that you mark the other side so you know where you're going, and you should do that here as well. I haven't done it and I won't cut into it because my gather threads are right there. And then you have to turn your sleeve inside out. It's very simple, really. So this one we're rushing through, and it's the easiest way to pull your ruffles with the sleeve sitting on the inside. So I'm finding the markers here and I put those on top of each other. And then I just pull it as ever so that it fits. And once it fits, I know it's right. I wrap my threads round the pin. There we go. I'll go to the other side, pull those as well equally, and that's it. And when that's got enough, I also wrap that around my pin. Have a good lot of tension here in my fingers, and I can pin this in as well. I sew straight through the center of my gather threads, and that does the trick. I think a close-up wouldn't have helped you there. What you want to do is stitch through your gather threads through the center. Make sure that you have no pins in there. Seams overlocked, and now we can pull out our sleeve. Wow, it really is a very, very nice sleeve. And I'm going to put it in. The thing to do is to always put your hand into your sleeve if you don't have a dummy, but I have a dummy, so I'm going to put it over here and check it. Yeah, look. Okay, now it hangs straight. Beautiful. Now I put my second sleeve in. I'm quite pleased with that here. I think it's really, really pretty. I think it does need a bow or something. And of course, really nice buttons or poppers. I haven't decided yet, but I think that this is very, very Victorian or Tudorish or something, elegant and pretty. So I hope Magdalena's really going to love this one. I can see some velvet ribbon here. Maybe when I pick up courage again, I do it in the evening. So we've got one more sleeve to go, so let's get on with it. And we're on to our last sleeve. This is the very, very cute puff sleeve, which you've all been waiting for. I've already done loads of videos on how to put this kind of sleeve in, how to put a ruffle in the top and all sorts of piping. So you can go back to those videos, and I'll also put them in the Academy course. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can go to the Academy, and if you're enrolled in the Virginia course, you can watch those as well, and they're also here on YouTube. If you're not enrolled to that course, no problem. I will link them beneath this video as well. So we're going to make this wonderful little sleeve. And the clue in this is same as we did with the facing, that you have the seam hidden in there and then it's turned up, so you have a totally clean edge here. It's very, very easy, probably the easiest sleeve to put in. So these are the pieces you need, and I've ironed my interfacing onto the facing. I would actually iron it onto the outside because we're going to put a ribbon on, and it made it harder not having that kind of support. So I would just iron the interfacing onto the outside. And I want to show you how you can get a ribbon into the exact position that you want. So if this is turned up and I want my ribbon to sit exactly there, let's just have a look at my finished item. And you can see we have the same distance here all the way around, and how to get that perfectly right. I want to show you a little trick for that. When you're working with ribbon, make sure that you have a new needle in it, or a needle that hasn't got a snag, because it will pull the threads in that ribbon. I had that on mine on the first one, and I actually changed my needle, so I've learned something. So what I'm going to do now is take my little sewing machine. I'm going to sew in a stitch now 1.5 centimeters away from the edge, so that when the centimeter allowance comes away and my ribbon is on, I've got just 2 mils showing. So let's do this. We're going to put it under so it sits exactly on the 1.5. Make sure your stitch length is up at 4.5 so that you can pull it back out if it is indeed visible. It is good to use the contrast color so that you can see where the ribbon needs to go. This little stitching line will guide us. Be very steady as you move it all the way around the marking that you see on your sewing machine for the 1.5. Go under the sewing machine, then make sure that you get your stitch length back down to 2.5. Lock in your stitches. Now I can put my ribbon on here like this while I'm sewing. I'm not going to pin anything, and I'm going to pop it directly on that line so it's not over it, it's just on the side, and that will help me get this in really perfectly well. You might want to pull the ribbon over a tiny bit to the left while you're sewing, just to get into the swing of this, so that it sits directly on that edge. And now I'm gently going to move this round, and my eye is going to be on the edge of my presser foot so that I can guide it around like you can see me here doing, all the way around, and it's absolutely no problem at all. That looks pretty perfect to me. It really is a very good technique to have this kind of line on there to gauge yourself, because it's not easy to get it in right otherwise. And like this, as long as you go slow and steady, it'll be perfect. So now I'm going to sew it in on the other side as well. That looks absolutely perfect. It's really, really is good. So now I can take my facing, put it over the top, right side's facing here, and I'm just going to put a few pins in like this, not along where I'm stitching, and just get in the way. I just don't want it to move, okay? So turn this back over, or you could stitch from this side. It doesn't really matter. If you can see through, if you use a white, I'm not sure whether it's going to confuse you or help you. I would stitch it from this side because that was your gauge, and the edge has to be exactly the same, obviously. So I would stitch from this side, and we're now going to do exactly 1 centimeter seam allowance. Oh, how exciting is this? Let's get this under. 1 centimeter seam allowance. Trust yourself. Don't look where you've previously sewn. Just line it up with the edge, really steady all the way around. Do. And let's have a look how I did. You pull this along, look at that. That's quite nice. I would say that's almost perfect. And if you have gone over a little bit too much to the other side, again, you can do the same thing where you just roll it over a bit. So what we want to do now is to understitch it. Now that we've got this together and it looks really spiffing, what we want to do is close our side seams. So I'm going to go back. So back on the sewing machine here, make sure this is nicely lined up, and I'm going to close my side seam. Next step is to iron the seam apart. Lovely. Whoops, there we go. Very nice. Now that that's lovely and ironed, I can turn it over like that. Ooh, that is really nice. I'm going to turn it inside out. With a bit of luck, both will look exactly the same. If I've done it right. Now, you could, of course, make it a little bit easier on yourself. To have just a couple of mils showing is really hard. You could go down side to not 1.5 but to 2 centimeters, have it a little bit lower, give yourself a little bit more leeway just in case it needs it, and that will work as well. So now, to make sure that when I put this on it's easy to do, I'm going to just sew around the edge, just once, very close to the edge. Just move the fabric around while you're sewing, and then just off the edge. It doesn't have to be a small stitch, any stitch will do. It's just so it doesn't push and pull when you're putting it on. Now I'm going to do my sleeve. The first thing to do is put the gather threads in, and we want to go from one side to the other, and we're going to put 2 in the top, and then at the bottom here I'm going to start here just over where my snip is, and I'm going to lock in my stitch like I did on the top at the Virginia, just with a few stitches, so it does pull still out, but the likelihood is that these threads are not going to be pulled out, or there can be staying in there. It doesn't really matter. So back to this here. So start basically where the front snip is. Put the stitch length back up to 4.5 and then move all the way around close to the edge. And the next one is going to be foot width from the one we're just putting in now. And now I'm also going to do the lower one as promised. So you start a little bit before, same thing. Look in that stitch at the end, and second line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my gather threads already before I put it in. Usually I don't do that, but with a puff sleeve, the easiest sleeve on the block, you can easily do that. And the rule of thumb is really that you want to gather it for 4 centimeters on either side. So if I take my measurement here, you can see that's almost 4. I do the same on the other side. I just pull it from this side up to there, about 4 centimeters. Yep. On the lower end where I've got my little gather where the turn up is going to go over, I'm going to pick them up out from the side and I'm going to pull it as close as it will go, and that's usually right. Next step is to just close that little seam. Now I'm just going to iron that seam apart. There we go. Lovely. And I can now put on there we go. Not light. And now I can put my little cuff onto my sleeve. So the right side here and the right side there go on top of each other. So effectively we're going to have wrong side against right side, right? And it's going to pop this in here. Usually it's just right, you know, if you pulled it as much as you could. It's just really not difficult. So now I'm going to put my thread around here with a figure of 8 and distribute them a bit more, because here's my snips, so I want to have some of that coming over to that side, right? So it's that 3 centimeters just over. It's actually a little bit more here, but there we go. And now I'm going to sew from this side, so I can just pin it from this side. As long as it's distributed well on the other side, that'll do. It's way easier to sew it from this side, and when you try to do it from the other side, it's going to be pushing a little bit, and then you get a little pleat in this fabric here, so you don't really want to do that. You want to make sure that you sew from this side. So now we're going to go back on the sewing machine and just sew it in 1 centimeter seam allowance, and start anywhere on it and just move it around. Make sure the gathers are nice and flat. That's looking really, really nice. Quite impressed with that. Now all I have to do is overlock it. So now I'm going to do some understitching again because we are loving that understitching. So you fold up your seam allowance so that it sits right there, and we're going to stitch it down there. Going to go inside and stitch it down there. There we go, that's in already. It is a really nice sleeve to do. It's actually quite simple, and with all those other videos I've got for it, from piping to inserting ruffle, putting diamantes on, all sorts of things I've done for this. So, and those are all the videos that have to do with the Western blouse, because that's the Western blouse sleeve here. And that is also a really, really cool pattern, which I will extend to H12. And in this pattern pack, you already have it extended to that size. So sleeves are the first to be extended. Beautiful. Now, all I have to do here is roll this up now, like that, and press it. Next step is to put my sleeve in. Old method, because I've got that one in already, it doesn't really matter, but I can see that this is my left sleeve. I put it on my left arm, and then I go through my left armhole, turn it to the inside, because sometimes you have so many threads and stuff hanging, you start not seeing where you need to go anymore, especially when you start to sew. So this is a really good way, because there's only one seam, so you know which one goes together. Put a vertical pin in there, then grab the sleeve head top and put that onto the sleeve head. There we are. Put another vertical pin in. Right. Again, we've just done this with the other one already, but let's do this again. The first few pins always go in flat. You roll the fabric over your fingers, because I've got brilliant light. The sun's just coming round, and that gives me such good light. So that I'm going to do this again. So 2 pins is the rule of thumb that go in without holding anything in, and you don't need to hold anything in anyway, because this is, whoops, something's come apart here. Quick pin will make sure that doesn't fall over. This one is so good because you don't really need to worry about that too much, because obviously it's a puff sleeve. It's ideal for people that just starting to sew, because you can't go wrong. So when it fits on, take a pin and secure. Right, and now the rule of thumb is your gathers should go 4 centimeters either side. That always looks perfect. It just seems to be the magic number. So I'm gonna go, oh, it's just to where I've gathered it. Well, that's a bit of luck, isn't it? So I'm gonna just move them down to that point. So I know now that's going to look good. We're going to turn it inside out, of course, to check it as well. Always check what you're doing before you start sewing. There, a bit more over. I'll do the same on the other side. It looks good. Now, the next step is to turn it out and have a look. Let's turn this back up just so we get a good look. And we can see where the gathers start. So they start about 2 centimeters in. Go over to the other side and see if that's the same here, and it is. So that's good. And that's fluke, people. I don't always have it right. And this looks okay as well. It seemed to be a little bit more gathered. No, I think that's fine too. So make sure that both sides are the same before you start sewing in. You don't want to gather like, which is whoops up there, and then on the other side it's way lower down. It doesn't look nice. It doesn't take much to check it and repin it if you have to, and just move your gathers. So but summing this up is the 4 centimeter rule from sleeve head point to the front and to the back will give you perfect results. And now I can just sew this in. We can again start anywhere on here, and you can move the cuff out of the way because we haven't attached that yet. That's our last little thing we have to do in a minute. So let's go all the way around. We can move the cuff down because we haven't turned it up and stitched in the ditch yet because it would get in the way. So we do that straight after. So you can move the cuff out of the way. have a look at your gathers and make sure they sit really nicely, nice and even. Cool. Now, can't wait to serge this because it is full of thread. Look! It's a thread disaster. Right, so I'm just going to cut a few off just so I can see what I'm doing. That's the other thing. Any beginner watching this is like, right, you know, I remember that when I first started sewing, this messiness used to really confuse me. I'd be going like, what is this? Like I said, I was very messy as well. And my dad bought me my first sewing machine. And this is not a romantic story that now follows, because I bought myself some really expensive fabric. Wanted to make myself a sort of like little hanger for a blouse underneath it and stuff. It was all the what was her name? Oh, what was her name? You know, Harry and Sally, that actress. Anyway, it was that time, and she was wearing all these kind of clothes, and I wanted to make Meg Ryan. That's it. I wanted to make a dress that would, you know, that Meg Ryan look, you know, cutie little girly look, and I was a skinny little thing. Bought this really expensive fabric, and well, you can guess what happened. The dress didn't come out right. The pattern I bought from Border, I think it was awful. It didn't fit to the sizing at all. It looked terrible. I didn't understand the instructions, and the expensive fabric, the dress went in the bin, and I don't think I ever used that sewing machine again. So yeah. And it was a cheap sewing machine as well, so I think my dad wanted to do well, but he didn't realize that there's a difference. So when you buy your first sewing machine, it's almost more important to have a really good one than when you can sew. I mean, I can sew on the most darndest machine ever, and it'll come out very nice. That's like people that can take beautiful photographs. You give them a really plain camera that's like 20 years old, and they take better pictures than you do with a really new, you know, brilliant camera. So, and it's the same thing. You need quite good equipment when you don't really know what you're doing. So I've got my Pfaff. This is the model app, the Pfaff Select, that I much prefer to use. Unfortunately, has got something wrong with it again. It's the tension plate, and the repair shop doesn't get it right. I think I'm just going to go in there and say, right, do it this time, because they keep doing like this quick fix, and you pay for it and it's not fixed. Anyway, so that's why I work with the electronic one. Much prefer the mechanical one. They are about $700 an app, and I think it's worthwhile getting it on a payment plan because you won't regret it. These machines will last you. I've had mine 25 years, the first one, and it never failed. It was still made in Germany, and now I've got the Pfaff down here that's always failing. It's the one made in China, but I think it was a dodgy one from the beginning. Not like the first Pfaff Select, and then I was telling my students about it, and one of the ladies that used to come to my house, she bought the Pfaff Select 5, I think, or 5.2, which cuts off your thread as well. I was really jealous, and that was so smooth, that was so quiet. That's the most beautiful machine ever, but it was well over £1,000. So yeah, so that was out of my league, but she came in there and I was so jealous. So Pfaff really rules the roost for me, at least. And the reason why is when you look at this here at the back, you can see it. It's got like this little foot, and that's an extra transport, so you don't need a walking foot. It's a built-in walking foot, which is fantastic. So anyway, enough of this talking. Let's get this beautiful sleeve done. I'm gonna go and overlock it now. This is so exciting. I love it. I'm coming to the end of my little sew along, which when I say little sew along, I don't think we'll ever do it quite like this. I think next time I stick to one variation, shall I? Because this was a lot of information for you to all take in, but I'm hoping that you can rewatch it without thinking this is way too long, and you know, refer back to it over and over. And I've actually really enjoyed it, but it was a little bit overkill, I think. Let's not leave something out. And again, the only thing we do is to press from the top. I don't want to flatten my gathers too much, so I'm just gonna like do the little bit where I put some steam on it and then my hand, just to bit. There we are. There's a bit of steam coming out. Just put your hand on it like that, and it's attacking me, this dress. So cute. I hope little Victoria will love this, and also I hope it fits really well. When I send stuff to my friend Ella, who's got those two beautiful little girls, you never quite know because obviously you can't try it on. Lovely. Do the other side as well. And all I have to do now is take this and stitch in the ditch, pop it under the sewing machine, and just a few stitches back and forth will do. Here we go. As ever, I'm never sure about these big ruffles. I'm not sure. I think it would have been nicer to have the ruffle higher up. What do you guys think? You can let me know what your thoughts are there. I think I can't put buttonholes in, that would destroy it. So poppers on the inside, I think that'll be all I do to that. And that concludes this little dress. On here, I'm still undecided which kind of buttons I'm going to put on. So still don't know whether I should put like little metal buttons on there or cover buttons with velvet. I've got the blue ones for the other one. It's not the same color, so I can't really do that, but I have white buttons as well, so I'm gonna have to think about that. And then of course I've got this beautiful dress, which is Magdalena's dress, which I think is really nice, especially for a girl that's 8 years old. It's still really girly, but it's also a little bit grown up. Now I think this here still needs something, so I'm going to put some more lace on. I had some comments actually on that saying, well, why don't you put something else on there to just really lift it? And I was thinking, yeah, I should put some cream or, you know, this off-white petticoat or something underneath it. So I want to do a little bit more, which extends my sew along a tiny bit, and I hope nobody minds. So I'm going to be filming that on Monday, and then on Tuesday we're going to really have the last day of the sew along. You can then finish your stuff, and I'm just delaying the judging of what you did to the next weekend. And the prizes I'm really excited about. I keep thinking, what will I give to people? But because somebody in the UK might actually win it, I don't want to say now, because in America I can obviously send that really great surprise parcel, and if you're in the UK it'll have to be something different, of course, but it won't be any less exciting. Hope you enjoyed watching, and don't forget you can still join this sew along, or you can just make this pattern. All the videos are going to be on the course, some of them here on YouTube, and I hope you make some really stunning stuff. Send me the photographs. I will do a sleeve pack which we're going to be selling, and I would really love to have loads of examples of what you did with those patterns in it. And if you want to be featured in that, then yeah, just send me those pictures over. They need to be well lit and They can be taken with an iPhone, obviously, with a good phone camera. They are going to be really nice as well. In fact, I take a lot of my photographs with my little camera, but they have to be well lit. So thank you very much for watching, everyone, and that's the end of the dresses. Just a bit more embellishment to go. See you next week.